we'll be going over IRS Form 2848, Power of Attorney and Declaration of Representative. I recorded this video a little over a year ago, but I wanted to re-record this so that we could go into a little bit more detail, especially since I've updated the accompanying article to include more detail as subscribers have requested. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this tax form, kind of both parts of it. Part one is the power of attorney. Part two is the declaration of representative. And then we're going to go through some maybe filing considerations and some more background information. So as I mentioned, there are two parts of this tax form. Part one is the power of attorney form. This contains the information that the IRS needs to update their central authorized file. Basically, their way of allowing IRS employees to know exactly who is allowed to receive information as well as act on behalf of a taxpayer when discussing tax matters with the IRS. So there's part one, that's the power of attorney. Part two is the declaration of representative, which is the designated person's declaration that they understand certain aspects of this authority that they're about to receive. So generally how this would work is if you're the taxpayer, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an individual, and let's imagine you want your CPA or your tax attorney to represent you in front of the IRS for an audit. They would most likely complete this form, except for the parts where you need to provide certain information. And then you would sign and authorize them to update your files. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about some of these nuances. Let's go ahead and start with the top of the form. So the power of attorney, this is the part that you as the taxpayer would likely have some role in. Taxpayer information will enter the taxpayer name and address up here, as well as your tax ID number. So this can be a social security number. This can be an ITIN or an individual taxpayer identification number. It can be an employer ID number. For people who are operating a sole proprietorship, so if you're operating a business but you put it on Schedule C, you don't have an S corporation, you don't have a partnership, then you would the IRS asks that you put in both your taxpayer ID number as well as your employer ID number. So whichever one is applicable. Of course, there isn't a lot of clear guidance on how to do that, since the fields look like they only support one tax ID number. But if you get to this point, your representative should be able to walk you through exactly what they would require from you. So you would enter your daytime telephone number as well. So an important note, if you're a married couple and you're filing a joint tax return, you'll likely see two Form 2848s, one for each spouse. So you can't combine your authority. So if John Doe was married to Mary Doe, they can't just put both of their information fields on the same Form 2848. John would receive one, and then Mary would receive a separate form. So we do go into a little bit more detail about what you would do if you're, say, the administrator of an estate, or if you're a trust fiduciary, what you would do on behalf of a deceased taxpayer. We do go into a little bit more detail in our article. So in part two, in line two, you can name up to 4 representatives, and this is the field that likely, if you're going to a CPA firm, they'll probably list the people that they want that they would like you to authorize as a representative on your behalf. So if there's, say, 2 or 3 accountants that are working on your taxes, then you would expect the relevant people to be listed here. So name and address on the left-hand side. The CAF number is a number that's assigned by the IRS for someone that may already be listed as either a power of attorney by someone else or someone that's authorized to receive tax information. So the CAF is simply a centralized file so that if an IRS employee needs to research whether or not a specific representative has the taxpayer's authority or authorization, they can go into the CAF file and pull that out. But they don't necessarily need to have access to other parts of a taxpayer's tax record. So that's the way the IRS has set this up, is that this is specifically for representatives, people that are authorized to either speak to the IRS or receive information. So the PTIN is the Preparer Tax ID number. So this would be their tax, like their ID number as a tax preparer. Telephone number, fax number. They would check if any of these are new. You can also check if this person should receive copies of notices and communications from the IRS. In most cases of IRS representation, they are going to select the first 2 fields. And you'll notice that this form only allows the top 2 people to receive notices of communication and communications from the IRS. So in line 3, again, your representative will probably outline everything that they would like you to authorize specific to your tax situation. So the important part is that there have to be specific acts or sections of your tax liability that you can authorize. You can't just write something like all tax matters, all tax forms, all years and periods. So you can't do that because the IRS does understand the fact that sometimes authorizations should expire. And just because someone is representing you on a tax matter doesn't mean that they need to have access to all of your tax information unless the 2 of you agree that it's pertinent to the issue that they're helping you with. So perhaps you're a business owner and you've hired someone to help you specifically on your individual tax return, but you don't need them looking at your Form 1120 return, the corporation's return. Like, your business is perfectly fine. You just want them to focus on individual income tax on your Form 1040. They can go back a couple of years. They can go forward, a couple of years. It is important to note that the IRS will not record someone in the CAF for more than 3 years after the end of the year. So in this case, 2024, the IRS would say at the end of 2024, you can go up to 3 more years. So 2025, 26, 27. But if someone tried to authorize into 2008 or 28, then the IRS would say, we're not doing that. So this would be perfectly acceptable, and you can actually go back as many tax years as possible. If you need to break this up into periods for either quarterly returns or for some other reason, you can be specific, like you only want to authorize certain information, or representation, specific to a tax issue, and you can break that into quarters if you want. So There is a note in the instructions. So if you wanted to authorize someone to represent you for innocent spouse relief, you would enter, and then whatever years impacted. So IRS Form 8857 is the innocent spouse relief form. But if you file this with your Form 8857 and you did not, so if you do not describe innocent spouse relief with that form specifically, then you have to sign the IRS Form 8857. If you annotate it clearly here, then you can have your representative sign your Form 8857 on your behalf. And again, you don't have to, but generally this is the information that you should know as your tax professional or your representative is going through this form with you. So you can also check this box for if you want to authorize a specific use that's not recorded on the CAF. So there are certain items that are pre-recorded on the CAF. There are certain one-time exceptions that might be a limited situation that are not recorded on the CAF. So, for example, if you were to file for IRS Form 843 to claim a tax refund or request abatement, say for tax penalties, that would be a one-time thing. Once you get through that, then the power of attorney is no longer applicable. Other applications for like a whistleblower submission, so that would be on IRS Form 211. Certain religious members can apply for exception or exemption from self-employment tax. That would be on IRS Form 4361. So there may be other one-off situations where you want to specifically authorize a use that's not otherwise recorded. So, and then you would describe that in 5A, line 5A. So you can check these boxes, and most likely your representative will check the ones that they feel they need. So if they want to substitute and add representatives, you can check the box to authorize them to do that. If you want them to be able to sign your return, you can do that. If you want them to be able to send information to third parties or access your records directly through an intermediate service provider, so there are services that would provide that service. You can authorize those. You can also authorize other acts that may not have that may not have been designated. So again, one of those other items that you decided to authorize, you would write that out here. You know, obviously they would probably have a little bit more articulate description of what you're trying to obtain here, but that's how it should look on your line 5A. On the next page, line 5B would be specific things that you would not authorize. So there might be like you specifically do not want that person to access your records through an ISP. You might not want them to share information within the office. You might not want them to speak to the IRS without you in the room, right? Like, so there might be certain things that you would like them to do and you can designate them. There might be certain things that you want to maintain control over. And again, you would annotate that in line 5B after a discussion with your representative. In line 6, this is the retention or the revocation of a prior power of attorney. So by default, there's one thing I need to go back to line 5B for. So under any conditions, regardless of what you put in line 5B, your representative will never be allowed to endorse or negotiate checks on your behalf. This includes accepting or directing payment, electronic payment into an account that they own or their firm owns or has any affiliation with. So they cannot do that for you, even if you write that down in line 5A and don't preclude it in line 5B. The IRS will not allow any kind of manipulation when it comes to your representative and checks on your behalf. That will always remain a taxpayer responsibility. So if you're acting on behalf of someone that is, say, may not be able to represent themselves, then you would need to establish yourself as a fiduciary, not just a power of attorney. So, but that's in a different filing. We'll put a link to, the fiduciary notice form in the show notes, and any other forms that either were mentioned in this video or are specific to the video or the article. We'll put links in the show notes. So in line 6, if you wanted to check this, this means that any power of attorney that was already on file for the same years and periods will remain in place. But if you check this, you would have to attach a copy of the power of attorney that you want to keep it remain in effect. But if you don't check it, by default, it's the IRS will scrub the authority of any earlier powers of attorney for the same matters and the same years or periods. So if you had someone like a CPA that was working with you on your taxes for your income tax return, and you decide that you're going to fire that person and hire a new person, and you go through this with them, if you don't check the box, then the IRS will automatically update their records so that the old CPA does not have access to your tax information anymore, but your new CPA does, which is the default because that's generally how most people do this. So in line 7, you're going to, in this case, John Doe, he's printed his name. He would sign in the white space and date it above. If he was doing this with a company, he would have his title. If there's a different name than the individual on line 1, you would print that name, if it wasn't John Doe. So then, and that's the taxpayer's responsibility here. So in part 2, we'll go over it a little bit more. And this kind of goes into the different types of people that are able to represent you. So this is really for your background information. So the person that's allowed to represent you cannot be suspended or disbarred, by the IRS. In general, the most common people that would be authorized, unlimited practice authority in front of the IRS would be attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents. So this means that even if they never did your taxes before, if you hired the person and you authorize them and they're in good standing with the IRS, they can represent you in front of the IRS as much as you want them. So if you're filing an appeal, they can go through the appeals with you. The primary difference between an attorney and a CPA / enrolled agent is that if you end up going to tax court or any court to appeal the IRS on a decision, an attorney that is in good standing and admitted to the respective court can represent you in court, whereas that crosses the legal boundary, and CPAs and enrolled agents cannot represent you in the manner that an attorney can. So the lawyer-client privilege, all of those things, practicing law in front of, as an officer of the court, those things would not apply to B and C. So not only that, but the person who is the representative is subject to certain regulations as outlined in Circular 230, which basically sets guidelines, rules, and regulations for tax practitioners. Um, they're recognizing that they are authorized to represent you for the specific matters, and then they're one of these following. So, an attorney, a CPA, and an enrolled agent, those are pretty standard. Um, an officer or a full-time employee of a company or a taxpayer organization. So that has to be a full-time or a bona fide person on behalf of the company. Family member, it has to be an immediate family member. So, spouse, parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, step parent, stepchild, or step brother or sister. You can't have like your second cousin happens to be a tax attorney. If he's a tax attorney, then you could authorize him here. But if he says he knows a tax attorney and he'll work out issues with that tax attorney for you, you can't use him as a family member authorized here. Enrolled actuaries, you're probably never going to see this unless you specifically work with actuaries. Unenrolled return preparer. So if you went to someone who's not a CPA, they're a tax preparer, then that person can represent you on tax returns that they prepared and signed, or if they weren't able to sign it, then they prepared it for you. If they're eligible to sign the return, if they have a PTIN, and they're not a ghost tax return preparer. A lot of people that do tax preparation maybe consider maybe what's considered a ghost return preparer, which means they don't actually put their PTIN anywhere on your tax return. So that means when you go to see what happened, if you're getting audited, that person is gone. You can't track that person down. The IRS has no idea who they are. So your return preparer has to have a PTIN. And then they also have to have completed an annual filing program that the IRS has. If you happen to be in a client of either a low-income tax clinic or a student tax clinic program, then a qualifying law student, like an accounting student, business graduate, or a law graduate working in one of these offices would be able to do this. They would be the second name on the form, and then either the CPA or the tax professional or the attorney that they're working under would be the first line. And then enrolled retirement plan agents, unless you're administering a retirement plan, this probably won't apply to you. So this is what it should look like. In this case, this person is an enrolled agent. The IRS has given them their credentials. This would be the enrollment number, and then that person would sign and date the form here. So that's all we have for this form. I'll go over a couple of points of note that you could scroll through all of the instructions, but a couple of frequently asked questions that I've fielded. How do you file IRS Form 2848? So you can file it in one of three ways. You can file it either online through the IRS website. You can file it by fax or mail. And if you do that, the IRS has an office specific to the state or territory where you live. So we included all of that information in our article, which you can find. So the IRS does accept electronic signatures. There are specific requirements, again, covered in our article. So the IRS does accept electronic signatures, but only for 2848 forms that are filed online through the IRS website. So we covered all the people that are authorized to practice in front of the IRS and their responsibilities. Basically, they're allowed to practice, and they recognize that they're authorized to represent you, and they're going to follow the law. That's basically what they were saying. So I think that's about all we have for this form. Again, we do cover some of the details in a little bit more depth in our article, so you can check it out at teachmepersonalfinance.com. Type in IRS Form 2848 and you'll see our article appear. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if you have an idea that you would like to see discussed in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.